Piper James moved silently through the lumbar-lit corridors of the sleek tech company headquarters, her plain apron tied tightly over faded jeans and a threadbare shirt. The midnight launch party was in full swing, the air thick with excitement and the hum of conversations filled with industry jargon. Voices buzzed about the revolutionary drone set to change everything, but Piper's world was simpler, refilling trays of sparkling water, offering crostinis to guests who barely spared her a glance. As she balanced a tray toward a cluster of sharply dressed executives, a man with a perfectly coiffed beard smirked, glancing down at her stained apron and carefully untied hair. "Are you even from around here?" he said, his voice dropping just loud enough for her to hear the dripping condescension. "This sort of thing might be over your head." Piper felt the sting but said nothing, glossing over his words with practiced ease. She had learned that invisibility was sometimes protection. Across the room, the enormous display screen blinked to life, projecting sleek animations of the drone as it prepped for launch. The crowd drew tight, the low hum of admiration swelling. Cameras flashed at the edges of the polished hall, where laser lights cut gleaming outlines across the high ceilings. Suddenly, a loud metallic screech shattered the rhythm of the event. One of the drones, a glimmering machine covered in whirring rotors, zigzagged wildly out of control. It crashed violently into the crowd near the catering tables. Sparks flew as its damaged fuel cell ignited, setting nearby napkins and decorations ablaze. The room erupted into chaos, shrieks, stumbling feet, and thick plumes of smoke. Panic ignited the air. In the middle of the confusion, Piper's steady hand tightened around her tray. She stepped forward. The sudden explosion of noise and movement sent waves through the crowd, ripples of fear and confusion. Guests pushed at one another, some yelling, others bawling, trying desperately to find a way out. The sleek, polished floor became a surface for frantic shuffles and stumbling legs. Staff members clustered near the edges, uncertain how to help, frozen by their lack of training and paralyzed amid the chaos. Piper's heart pounded in her chest, but her breath remained steady. Years of training, not forgotten, only buried deep, surfaced instantly. She looked beyond the flames licking at the crisp white napkins, eyeing the panicked crowd and the cluster of guests closest to the fire. The thick smoke curling upward stung at her throat, but she inhaled deliberately, focusing on what had to be done. With a voice clearer and firmer than she expected, she called out, "Everyone, back away from the fire this way." Her tone cut through the din like a blade. A few heads turned, startled by the plain pantry cook commanding the crowd. "There's a fire extinguisher over here," Piper shouted, scanning for a familiar red cylinder. Some guests sneered at her, their polished voices dripping skepticism. "Who does she think she is?" a tweed-jacketed executive muttered, half laughing while stepping back. A tech blogger whispered under her breath, "Probably just some catering temp pretending." But the flames were growing, and hesitation could cost lives. Piper ignored the sneers. She grabbed a metal serving tray from a cart nearby and jabbed it at the edges of the flame, engulfing a tablecloth. The fabric flared momentarily, but the tray smothered the worst of it. Encouraged, she spotted the fire extinguisher mounted near the serving pantry and sprinted toward it, weaving between stumbling guests. With practiced efficiency, she pulled the pin, braced the nozzle, and set the extinguisher to work, spraying a concentrated foam over the flames as they peaked toward the decorative lighting overhead. The acrid scent of chemicals mixed with smoke filled the room, drawing startled gasps from the crowd. The fire hissed and shrank, cowering under the determined blast. Meanwhile, Piper's sharp gaze caught the corner of the room where several guests were trapped against a wall by the surge of panicking people. She called out to two young men nearby. "Help me move those carts," she commanded, and without waiting for replies, she darted over, pulling sideways at a heavy metal shelving unit stacked with supplies. The men stiffened but then pushed with all their might as Piper directed them to clear a path. Those pinned pressed through the gap gratefully. A woman near the fire coughed violently, her eyes red and glassy as smoke filled the air. Piper dropped to one knee beside her, gently helping her up and motioning, "Out this way, keep moving." She led the group toward the nearest emergency exit, calming their trembling hands with quiet, firm words. Her voice was steady, unwavering, the one constant in the storm of confusion. Throughout, Piper noticed that the event staff still hovered near the periphery. Their hesitance was palpable, their disbelief thicker than the smoke. One young assistant yanked her sleeve. "You shouldn't be doing this," he whispered, half frightened, half aggravated. But Piper shook her head. "Someone has to act. You, too, help me clear these people." Her eyes held a command that left no room for refusal. Meanwhile, a man in a tailored suit broke through the crowd with a handheld extinguisher and joined Piper. "I didn't think these things would actually work," he admitted breathlessly, sweeping it over the last smoldering bits. The noise was deafening, panicked screams, glass shattering under shoes, the roar of the fire alarm mingling with the drone's groaning fall from earlier. Piper's ears rang, but she felt completely clear-headed, as if the flood of years handling emergencies had recalibrated her instincts instantly. Finally, the flames retreated and the smoke began to thin. The crowd's frantic energy cooled into helplessness mixed with relief. Emergency responders arrived in a rush, flashing lights, orders shouted, medical personnel tending to minor burns and smoke inhalation. People who had previously scoffed at Piper paused in their tracks, their voices silenced by the clarity of what they'd witnessed. The man with the snide comment from earlier now stared at her with widened eyes, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. A sharp-faced event organizer approached cautiously. "Miss, you really saved lives tonight. The way you took control, that was incredible." Without pretense, Piper wiped the sweat and soot from a streak on her forehead. "I just did what I had to do," she said simply. Her voice might have been quiet without the fire, but now it carried an unspoken weight of truth and experience. From the back of the room, smartphone flashes bloomed, guests snapping videos of the aftermath and of Piper quietly helping others gather their belongings. The murmurs of admiration grew steadily louder, visitors exchanging brief, stunned conversations about the pantry cook who stepped up when no one else would. Piper's eyes scanned the disaster zone one last time. The smoke had cleared, no flames remained, and the crowd was being funneled toward exits. But in her mind, she was already playing through the next steps she wished she could take: shielding, triage, organizing. Someone hesitated near her, an older man with a silver badge clipped to his jacket. He looked at her with frank gratitude. "You have a background in emergency care, don't you?" he asked softly. Piper nodded but offered no more. The room still hummed with disbelief and newfound respect. The mocking voices had vanished. Her plain apron was gone beneath the dust of the evening's chaos, and in its place stood the undeniable presence of someone who belonged wherever lives depended on quick action and calm in the worst moments. The moment the crowd's astonished silence settled, Piper's thoughts drifted away from the glowing embers in the room to a time years earlier, where a different kind of urgency had followed her every step. She remembered the crisp morning air in Kandahar, the dry earth beneath the military base's perimeter fence, and the gunfire that echoed like thunder in the distance. As a combat medic assigned to her unit, every second was a test of nerves and skill. She saw herself kneeling over a wounded soldier, blood soaking through his uniform, fingers trembling as she applied a tourniquet with a practiced grip. The buzz of radios and shouted commands filled the chaos, but amidst the turmoil Piper was a center of calm. Orders came easily, triage decided swiftly, life saved or lost in measured breaths. One particular memory stood out, sinking deep beneath the others. The day her unit was caught in an ambush during a rescue mission. Her voice called out as she rushed between the bodies, tending to burns and shattered limbs, adrenaline propelling her forward. She recalled the sharp crack of an explosion nearby, heat flared up, and a flying shard slammed into her leg. She fell but dragged herself forward, desperate to reach a downed comrade. Pain burned through her like fire, but she pressed on. Weeks later, back in a quiet military hospital, white walls and antiseptic scents replaced the explosives and grit. A doctor's somber explanation followed. The injury was severe, nerves damaged beyond repair, and her active service was over. The silence that followed was suffocating. To Piper, it felt like the world had narrowed down to the steady aching in her leg and the loss of purpose. Following discharge, she found herself wandering a new battlefield, a civilian world that seemed indifferent to the skills that had once defined her. Job after job ended in polite rejection. Certificates expired or deemed irrelevant. Medical institutions cut corners budgeted too thin to train veterans like her. Every application letter was weighed against her injury and years away from formal practice. Her small apartment, dimly lit by a flickering lamp, bore the marks of sacrifice, a sole photograph of her son on the kitchen table, splotched with juice stains from hurried breakfasts. She wanted to tell him stories of heroism and resilience but instead focused on making meals to keep their tiny home afloat. It was during one late-night culinary temping gig that she met the manager of the tech launch organizer, who hired her quietly, not knowing, or maybe not caring, about her past. Despite the frustration, Piper kept her head down, taking pride in the simple act of work. She was a puzzle piece fitting into a world that didn't ask for her special skills. Her memories, pulled tightly beneath the surface, were both a comfort and a heavy burden. There were nights when the bitterness crept in, a gnawing regret for the dreams left tangled in military dust, the life she might have had if not for that one misstep in a blinding moment of courage. But those too passed, replaced by the steadfast determination to show up, day after day, for her son and for whatever chance came next. She sometimes thought back to the faces of injured friends, the quiet strength in their eyes, and wondered whether she could ever reclaim that part of herself. For now, she was the pantry cook, overlooked and underestimated. But beneath the apron, there was a reservoir of resilience waiting to be called on again. Returned to the glow of the present, Piper's gaze hardened. This accident tonight was an echo of those past intense moments, a reminder that her instinct to act, to lead, never truly faded. It had only been waiting for the right time to rise again. In the hours following the fire, the once boisterous tech launch event was a quiet hum of whispered conversations and cautious exchanges. The sharp scent of smoke lingered, but what clung more strongly to the guests' minds was the figure of Piper James, the unassuming pantry cook who had turned chaos into calm with nothing but quick thinking and steady hands. At first, the organizers scrambled to patch the unraveling event, but their efforts continually circled back to Piper. The lead executive, David Reynolds, sought her out amidst the scattering crowd. He extended a hand, genuine respect shining through the usual corporate veneer. "Piper, I can't thank you enough. You saved lives tonight. Your quick reaction and leadership were beyond anything I could have expected." Piper nodded, shrugging off the praise as if it weighed too heavily. "I just did what I had to," she replied, voice steady but soft. Word traveled fast. Clips from the event, captured on phones and social media, showed Piper bathed in the harsh white glow of emergency lights, spraying the fire extinguisher with practiced precision. Comments flooded online, lauding her bravery and calling for her recognition. Late into the night, Piper's coworkers began to approach her differently. The young assistant who had earlier whispered that she shouldn't interfere now found an awkward smile and offered thanks. The catering manager, a woman named Lena, placed a tentative hand on Piper's shoulder. "You were incredible tonight. I'm sorry for not noticing you before." Piper met Lena's gaze, a quiet warmth flickering in her tired eyes. "Thank you," she said, a small smile breaking through. For once, her presence held weight beyond the corners of the kitchen or the shadows in the pantry. Among the guests, a few approached her directly, some with hesitant admiration, others with tearful gratitude. An elderly man with a camera insisted on a photo together, his voice thick with emotion. A young woman, overcome, hugged Piper, whispering how her calm had saved her young son from the panic. Piper's heart tightened with a mix of humility and something unfamiliar, pride. News outlets arrived the following morning, eager to highlight the unexpected hero of the high-profile launch. A local reporter caught up with Piper outside the building and managed a brief interview. With her apron replaced by a simple jacket and a fresh braid in her hair, Piper spoke clearly about the importance of staying calm and acting quickly. Her modesty shone through, but her professionalism intrigued and moved the viewers. Soon, the spotlight revealed more. Articles began surfacing with pictures from Piper's past life, her military days, medals discreetly pinned on her uniform, interviews showcasing her as a model medic in tough situations overseas. The public began piecing together the threads of a life so different from the quiet pantry cook they'd met. Social media users and local forums buzzed with calls to honor Piper properly. Her unexpected rise from the background to the forefront inspired many, stories of other veterans and unsung heroes pouring in. Piper's name trended not for corporate achievement, but for something far more genuine. Back at the tech company, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Where once Piper's clothes drew mocking glances, they now sparked respectful nods. Guests greeting her with warm acknowledgement became the new norm. The staff who hurried past her without notice paused to share smiles, and several started stopping by just to chat. During one break, David Reynolds asked Piper to join the team for lunch, a rare opportunity to be included among the event's very elite. She hesitated for a moment but accepted. At the table, conversations turned from technical specs and stock prices to genuine questions about her experiences, her past work, and what motivated her to act amidst turmoil. Piper spoke sparingly but with quiet confidence, sharing just enough to inspire curiosity without exposing too much. The group listened intently, some visibly moved by the unvarnished truth behind the woman they'd underestimated. As the day passed, what had once been a tightly held secret now surfaced gently. Photos of Piper from her military tours, her youth and strength documented in grainy black and white prints, circulated among guests and co-workers alike. Old interviews captured her compassion and dedication in vivid detail. Her story wasn't just a headline, it became a touchstone, a reminder that heroism wasn't always loud or adorned in medals. It sometimes came wrapped in humility and waiting silently in unexpected places. In whispered conversations over coffee and emails between departments, plans were already underway to recognize Piper in upcoming company communications. Some suggested a formal award at the next gathering. Others proposed featuring her story in newsletters to show a side of resilience and courage beyond technology's flash and glamour. Piper herself found the attention overwhelming yet strangely affirming. The same invisible presence she once felt had dissolved, replaced by a cautious but growing acceptance. When she passed through the same corridors where she'd once felt unseen, people now greeted her with warmth and respect, their eyes acknowledging the strength beneath her simple exterior. One afternoon, Lena approached Piper quietly in the pantry. "I've seen the messages, the videos. You've touched so many tonight," she said, her voice thick with admiration. "You deserve more than just thanks." Piper smiled, a rare lightness softening her features. "I've waited a long time to feel seen," she admitted. "Maybe this is the start." And with that, she allowed herself the hint of hope that the chapters ahead might be written differently, not defined by doubt or neglect, but by recognition and renewed purpose. What had started as a quiet night serving refreshments at a high-end launch had rippled far beyond expectation. Piper's courage and competence carved a path through smoke and fear, leaving an imprint not only on the event but on the hearts of many. The crowd's gasps had shifted from shock at disaster to awe at the strength of a woman who had quietly stepped in and refused to be invisible any longer. Days passed in a blur for Piper James, the echoes of that chaotic night still fresh but gradually softened by the steady rhythm of routine. Yet, amid the usual din of kitchen clatter and clinking glasses at the tech company's events, a new energy pulsed beneath the surface, one that touched Piper directly this time. It began with an unexpected voicemail left on her phone late one evening, the voice calm and deliberate. "Ms. James, this is Dr. Elena Cortez from the Regional Emergency Medical Training Center. We've been following your story and would like to formally invite you to join our upcoming paramedic recertification program designed for veterans with prior field experience. Please consider this an opportunity to reclaim your skills and step back into the medical profession you belong to." The message ended with a hopeful tone that seemed to reach out beyond mere words. Piper listened to the message thrice, her fingers tightly clutching the phone as memories of her past, her loss, and her reluctant acceptance of a simpler life swirled within her. The thought of returning to the world she'd once left behind both exhilarated and terrified her. Self-doubt whispered relentless questions. Was she ready? Could she handle the physical and emotional demands? Was she prepared to face what had shuttered that door years ago? Her son's small voice called from the other room, pulling her from the spiral of uncertainty. She glanced toward him, the steady anchor in her life. The gratitude from those she'd helped, the heartfelt thank yous, and the wave of public support floated like gentle currents beneath her fear. Somewhere beneath the layers of quiet pride was a flicker of courage stoked anew. After nights of thought, Piper made a decision. She called Dr. Cortez the next morning, her voice steady but soft. "I'd like to accept the invitation." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Piper traded the worn pantry aprons for a crisp, professional uniform. The training facility was bright and busy, humming with the energy of eager veterans, dedicated instructors, and modern equipment that felt both familiar and foreign beneath her hands. Her first day was a baptism of mixed emotions. Physical drills tested muscles she hadn't relied on in years. Classroom sessions rekindled knowledge long buried. Yet amid the sweat and moments of frustration, memories of past service whispered encouragement, reminding her that resilience was forged in adversity. Instructors noticed her quiet determination. One, a seasoned paramedic named Samira, approached Piper after a practical session. "Your instincts are sharp. You're a natural leader." The comment kindled warmth in Piper's chest, confirming something she hadn't dared hope. Though the training was intense, Piper found a rhythm, pushing through physical pain and mental doubts. Each day spent mastering emergency response techniques, trauma care, and crisis management strengthened her hold on the identity she thought had been lost. Outside the classroom, Piper returned to her community, her story spreading further. Invitations came from local foundations supporting single mothers with medical backgrounds, offers to mentor and share her experiences. Friends from her catering days watched with pride as she embraced this new chapter. One afternoon, after a long day of clinical simulations, Piper returned home to the soft glow of the evening light in her son's room. She knelt down, pulling him into a tight hug, the weight of her journey settling into a quiet peace. "I'm coming back," she whispered, stronger than ever. At the training center, as the final weeks approached, Piper found herself standing before a classroom filled with trainees, ready to take on a new role, as an instructor in emergency response. Invited by the program coordinators, she prepared to train others, passing on the calm confidence and rapid decision-making that had saved lives. On the day of her first class, dressed in crisp navy scrubs bearing the center's insignia, Piper stepped into the bright training room, heart steady and resolute. Eyes from the group looked to her with anticipation. Here was someone who had faced darkness and fear and chosen to rise. Her son stood at the entrance, waiting to catch a glimpse of the mother who had walked into the light, not just a pantry cook, not invisible, not afraid. She smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. Piper James was no longer a background figure in a world of technological glamour. She was a healer, a teacher, and a woman reclaimed, ready to face whatever challenges came next with the quiet strength that had always been there, waiting patiently beneath the surface.